What's going on, family? If you didn't know, just last week a pastor in California, Pastor Jarrid Wilson, committed suicide. I feel like I can't speak to this. I didn't know him. Really, I only heard about him because of his death. And I've really been thinking through and really been trying to understand. I mean, this has been a conversation with a few friends for a while now, but where do pastors go? Where do preachers go when they bleed? You know, so much of this role, this calling, is the perception of, listen, you're supposed to have it all together. You're not supposed to sin. You're not supposed to doubt. You're not supposed to carry shame. You're not supposed to wallow around. But image drives everything you do. We've made a video before talking about image and how it's so unhealthy, and yet it controls us in so many ways. And so for the preacher who has this, oftentimes mentality of, okay, I can't mess up. No one can know the things I'm struggling with. Where does the preacher go when they bleed? Where does the preacher go when they're hurting? And so for every bleeding preacher out there, my advice would be twofold. Number one, listen. 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 11 to 13 says, "Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave." For all of the noise that society brings, all of the noise that the enemy plants in our minds, worthless. The words that you speak don't matter. That you could disappear today and no one would miss you. We hear the enemy. We hear the voice we project on ourselves. We hear, and we often feel like we're surrounded by these voices. And so we're listening, but not to those voices, because God appears in the still small whisper. It's God who says in 1 Peter 5:7 to cast our burdens on him. Not just because he's a sounding board to our grief and our shame and our doubts and our pain, but because he's actually faithful enough to do something about it. And yet most of us know that he doesn't always speak. Could pray over and over again. God, take away my depression, take away my shame, take away these suicidal thoughts, take away this pain. They still remain. Pastor Jarrid had this tweet, and I'd love to read it to you. He says, "Loving Jesus doesn't always cure suicidal thoughts. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure depression. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure PTSD. Loving Jesus doesn't always cure anxiety. But that doesn't mean Jesus doesn't offer us companionship and comfort. He always does that." And to those who mental struggle and illness is so real, I think that resonates so deeply. If I pray and yet I struggle. And so the second thing I'd love to leave you guys with, the first was listen, the second is speak. Right, that there's life and death in the power of the tongue. But I don't just mean, saying positive things about yourself, but I mean speaking to the people around you. For preachers, this life could be so isolating. And I think for myself in college, all of those moments of thinking like God couldn't use me anymore, that this was over, that, no one would miss me if I was gone. That it was the people around me, the people who knew me best, my crew, who kept me steadfast, who kept me focused on the Lord. They even forced me to speak because I oftentimes didn't want to speak. So listen and speak. Listen, for the Lord is faithful. And he does speak, even when it looks like nothing is going right. And speak up. Don't let the enemy win. Don't let the thoughts overcome you. No, because there's hope for tomorrow. Hey, and if there actually is anyone who struggles, who's watching with suicidal thoughts or depression or feeling like there is no way out, there is no answer, please call this number below. It's not faith or medical help. No, it's faith in God to lead you, and trust in God that he is with you in every space of life. For I would hate for you to not find help out of this fear of disappointing God. So please call. Grace and peace.